Melissa Walker is the costume designer for the Hulu comedy Pen 15, starring Maya Erskine and Anna Konkle. I'm Denton Davidson for Gold Derby. Melissa, what would you define as fashion for a young teenage girl in the year 2000?
Uh, I mean, there's so many different levels to it because, especially, in the year 2000, I was in 10th grade and the girls are set in seventh. So the way that the fashion trends play out for someone that, had a job and had money to spend and could buy things that their parents weren't aware of versus 2 13-year-olds. There's the fashion magazines and all the teen magazines of what this idyllic, like, trend should be. There's the way it's executed by different levels, and the way a high schooler executes it versus the way a middle schooler executes it are definitely different. And we tried to play with that within, the eighth graders versus the seventh graders. And the fact of taking these styles and trends and having them delivered by different characters, some that are a little closer to the mark than others.
I remember just almost always being embarrassed of everything at that age. And not having the right brand name was a big part of it. So I thought it was so spot on when they talk about Mora's name brand jeans. And then they get super into this Tommy Hilfiger t-shirt that's like 4 sizes too big just because it's name brand. Was that your experience at that age as well? And is that something you wanted to bring to this?
Yeah, I think that it was always a little strange. And I remember my mother being like, "You're not a walking billboard. You don't need to, play into what's popular and whatnot. They're not paying you to advertise." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's what's cool." And I think that the 90s was very over branded and just ridiculous stuff too. And so luckily we had an amazing clearance team on the first and second season, because so much of that is what really allows the nostalgia to flow with this show, of just specific, like, there's obviously the overall aesthetic that we work together to create, but then the specific memories are what really drive it home for this show. So we got to, work with brands that are reimagining themselves, especially with this Y2K resurgence. So we got to work with Tommy Hilfiger. We got to, work with Skechers, and there were, collaborations that we did and rebuilds, and then there were, just our clearance team helping me when I was doing mass thrifting and being like, okay, we need to bring this and this back. But then there are a lot of brands. I mean, Jinkos was having a revival. So we got to include a bunch of things, but we had to rework a lot of it because even though there's a revival, it being 20 years later, it's still being redone slightly differently. Like, there ain't no pants out there as low rider as there were back in 1990 and 2000. And it is embarrassingly so, to the point where, we have all these poor 13-year-olds sitting in a classroom, and the studio teacher and I are going around like, okay, we're going to have to switch out these pants because they're a little too low. But I mean, that's what it was. And it's funny because, I am like the opposite. I'm like, God, I was so confident in these ridiculous trends. And I was like, yeah, I look great. And then, like, going back through yearbook photos and back through all the references, I was just like, oh God, what was I doing? It was so embarrassing all over again.
Well, I personally could relate to Brendan's coral necklace. I think all of us had one of those back in the day. What was that process like? Was it looking back through like your old photos, or what kind of research were you doing to make sure you had your mindset right?
It was a lot of that. It was, Anna, Maya, and I were going through old photos, old yearbooks. I bought, about 50 Y2K magazines, a bunch of old Delias and Alloy and Girlfriends. And it was, I think it was equally important to revisit these trends, but then to also be able to take this, large school and subdivide it into the different cliques. So the research was, I took a bunch of magazines from about like 1997 to 2002. And so that way, since we were set in 2000, we took like the alt girls and we kind of pushed their trends to be a little, they're, on the verge of trends where it's not quite caught on to be mainstream yet. And they're being a little more edgy versus, Maya and Anna, where it's more, well, Maya specifically more like hand-me-downs and being a few steps behind the trend of them wearing like, oh, the cool Skechers, but this cool Skechers from 3 years ago. And, just getting them a few steps behind the popular girls. And we wanted to make sure that we had the array of characters within this school setting.
And what goes into creating those day-to-day looks on any given day? I feel like, costume designers of contemporary costumes aren't really given enough credit all the time. And so what all goes into that, and what does a day look like in getting ready for these episodes?
Well, we definitely wanted to have, it was supposed to be anywhere America. So then we take what we can, do to divide the characters, and we focus on like the socioeconomic status of each character of, Anna is a little more preppy and a little more sporty. Her parents are going through a divorce. They're, a little preoccupied and just handing out 20s, like go to the mall, kind of like shooing her off and buying affection at the same time, but just almost to get her out of the way while they refocus on themselves. Whereas Maya is from a more frugal family. She has some of Shuji's hand-me-downs. She has like, things that are reworked. Like there was a big trend where, jeans would have like different kinds of accent fabric sewn to the bottom. And instead we took the trend, like we took the name brand trend and put Mora in that. Then we took like, the lesser than like version of that trend and like something that you could buy at JC Penney and put that on Anna. And then Maya's was a version where her mother just sewed rickrack and like curtain balls on the bottom of her pants. So we tried to take a trend and have it executed differently by each character and really focus on that. It was nice, especially with the girls being the creators and being the stars of the show, to really work within the psyche of developing each of these characters and how they're going to be translated for on camera.
One of the things or outfits that I think sort of was in the psyche of Maya, and it kind of just shows that they're growing up, but they're still children in some ways, was she had this Care Bears sweatshirt on. Is that sort of showing where they are in that age and that they are still kids in a way?
It was meant to reflect that. And it's funny because like a lot of these old, if you look through Delia's or Alloy catalogs, there is a lot of like this like resurgence of like Rainbow Bright, or like these things that were kind of 80s and then they were, popular again, or, Care Bears and different like different kinds of graphic t-shirts. So they're in there. And I think that like I had my friend, like I didn't wear a lot of, the My Little Pony sweatshirts and stuff, but they were in these catalogs. And I think it was an option for, younger generations, or for like, we have Maya whenever she's trying to lean more innocent, or, Reed is a little younger, we throw her into her go-to favorite Care Bears sweatshirt. It's almost, it's like a whoopee or a blankie or some kind of like comfort to cling on to. Wildly enough, Hulu let us use Care Bears for the masturbation scene in the first season. And I was like, all right, well, they're letting us do it. Here we go. So there was a nice juxtaposition that we were able to build there also. But yeah, God bless eBay, I was able to find a bunch of old vintage Care Bears that were like the exact ones that I had seen in some of these catalogs too. So it was nice to get spot on vintage to use in there. And yeah, definitely use it for when she's leaning towards, she wants to be more girly and she wants to, come into her own, but she slips, and we watch her, try to find herself a few times throughout both of these seasons.
Yeah. Maya's always just struggling a little bit more than everyone else, it seems like. One of the
Hard.
things that I including that is the Kangol hats when they're like they have like the three friends. I thought that episode was so funny. And then of course Maya's is just a little too small. Where did that whole idea come from for that?
Well, we wanted to get them something that like unified them and was kind of matchy. We had played with a few different ideas, but and again, it was reaching out to several different companies because I wanted to make it something that was name brand, and especially with just a big old print right on the forehead. Also, you know, bucket hats in the late 90s did have this resurgence, but I like the Kangol because it's a little more 90s and leans a little more, you know, LL Cool J vibes.
Exactly.
So we wanted it to not, and again, because that was the definition of Maura's character. She was more of a brand whore than there was still something that kept her from being a popular girl. And by over branding her closet and collection, it was about money, but still not fitting in. So we wanted it to be slightly off on the trends. And magically enough, Kangol's actually re-released that hat. I mean, I think I remember my friend having that one in red. And so finding it in purple and in our color scheme, and you know, clearances worked to get it cleared, but it was almost just like one big loser sign right there. And not saying Kangol's losers, we're not disparaging to Kangol's whatsoever, but the fact that it is a few years back, it is more of a mid 90s trend than a Y2K trend. The bucket hats that were more popular then were more of like the cloth, or I know a bunch of them with like Hawaiian prints on them were more of what we were seeing as a popular trend then. So we wanted to just kick it back a few years so it wasn't quite on the nose with vibing at the time.
Right. Did you have a favorite look or episode this season?
I mean, that the Mara episode is my favorite just because it really hits home on, well, first of all, trying so hard and like taking, you know, like what you have access to and trying to just force fit it like a puzzle piece into fitting into the trends or into the popular group. Also, the divide of, you know, when it's just two people, it's so simple and easy, and you bring that third person in, and the way that they fight for affection and fight to be recognized, I thought that it was beautifully written, and I was very lucky to get to accentuate it with pieces that just further either brought them together or really shoved that divide, like the hat with Maya, how it's like, oh, here we're all coming together, and it's like, but still you're a slight odd man out. Like,
And how did you end up in costume design? Like, what was the path that led you to Pen 15 in the first place? It seems
well, I was
fascinating.
brought into Pen 15. I actually did I did a pilot with Debbie Liebling, who's the producer, who brought me in on Pen 15, and the girls and I just instantly clicked, and it was magic from there of rehashing all of our best and worst memories from childhood and teen years. But I actually, when I was in, I'm sorry, my neighbors are a little loud. When I was in, I think it was fourth grade, my grandmother and both my great aunts were seamstresses. So they taught me to do pattern making and to sew. I think it skips a generation. My mother and my aunt were never interested. So then when I was interested, my grandmother and my two great aunts were like, just kind of swarmed in on me, and I loved it. And it's funny, like growing up and like going in high school, like I remember specifically not liking history, and then in college, and especially once, I think it's because public schools, they just teach you the same thing over and over again. Like I got North Carolina history every other year, and then finally I go to college and I'm like, yes, teach me other cultures. And then getting deeper into costume history, I was like, oh, what, this was just not presented to me right. And so that's when I really took a dive back into costume design and the history of it all. I took a few paths here and there. I did theater for a while, and that wasn't quite the right fit. Then I went into apparel design, and it's bothersome to just sit and make tech packs and then like ship them off for someone else to make. So I came back to working in motion picture because I miss the tactile hands-on approach and actually going and shopping the fabrics and working hands-on with, side by side with someone and using my skill set and being able to create it there rather than having it elsewhere and shipped back in.
And what's your favorite part about being part of this Pen 15 family now?
It's so close. I mean, every single department. And, it was a run and gun show. It was, it happened fast and furious, but we all took the time to collaborate with each other and to really, like, luckily, like, even the things that we didn't have time, it's like, oh, we're doing changing. We're going to switch it from this outfit to that one. But luckily, we had the base layer of, the knowledge and the reminiscing from the time, the basic aesthetic of, our color palette and what we wanted to let shine versus what we didn't. And it was, it was a lot of collaboration to the point where when it was, okay, we're holding cameras and we're switching things around, since we had that base and, we're all on the same page anyway, anytime something was changed last minute, it still naturally came together and everyone came together to help each other. And it really is an amazing family, an amazing group to work with.
Well, Melissa, congratulations on all your work. It's such a fun show. We wish you and the entire cast and crew of Pen 15 the best of luck this upcoming Emmy season. I want to encourage our viewers here to head over to goldderby.com, make your awards predictions for this upcoming season, and watch more interviews with top contenders like Melissa here. Thank you so much for talking with me about Pen 15 today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely chatting.